Good evening and welcome to this special MLK Day edition of Mental Health Monday, brought to you by Saving Grace Community Church and Grace House Cincinnati, a ministry and nonprofit agency of Saving Grace Community Church. Joining with me tonight, as always, our resident expert, President, CEO, founder, and Chief Medical Director and Officer of Modern Psychiatry, Dr. Quentin Moss. Good evening, my brother.
Good evening. It's good to be here.
And also joining us, our dear friend and our brother, Mr. Paul Booth, son of the late civil rights icon, Dr. L.V. Booth, former city council person and second director of the Human Relations Department for the city of Cincinnati. Good evening, Paul.
Good evening to you. Good evening to everyone.
It's this great day. It's a great day, and I'm so humbled and honored that you guys have blessed me us with your presence today as we continue in our series, The Real on Racism, and specifically tonight, The King Dream. The King Dream. This has been undeniably, as we've been saying for the past few weeks, a overwhelming year. It's really been an overwhelming year, and today we celebrated the life of Dr. Martin Luther King, and unlike in previous years, this year's celebration carries seemingly a greater significance because of the climate that is in our nation today. I mean, over the past year, we've seen social unrest and protests due to the unjustified murders and killings of Black men by law enforcement officers. And it seems even that overt racism has made a comeback to the point where it's ignited tension between people today. And the economy's down and the pandemic is raging, and it's really God's will and through His providence that this year we celebrate the things that Dr. King stood for such a time as this. It's been almost 58 years since the March on Washington was held for jobs and freedom. And when we heard Dr. King utter these words,
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream. My poor little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. That one day every valley shall be exalted, every hill and mountain shall be made low, the rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together.
Gentlemen, the question that has to be asked, and every time I hear that speech, I hear and feel the anointing of God. And we always remark how great Dr. King was at making the speech, but undeniably, he was a great preacher. And so the question I have to raise for both of you, as both of you can relate as males to Dr. King, as both of you are members of the same fraternity in which he was a member of. The question that has to be asked to both of you: is the King dream dead or alive? Dr. Moss.
It is very much alive. We can have very, very difficult times, much like we had last year, which continues to show a lot of the injustices and the disparities that continue to weigh on our freedoms and our land. But at the same time, we see that we have, new generations of people, not just Black people, not just white people, who are willing to go back and refer to that dream, to go back and use the playbook that he also used to try to raise the consciousness of a country and to demonstrate change. Much that we saw last year with the Black Lives Movement is reminiscent of what we saw with what Dr. King and many of his compatriots were trying to achieve. It's just that we took what was available back then, and we've had the advance of technology and communication, but we've used a very similar playbook, and that playbook is this. When we see injustice, when we see that there are these disparities, that we will go into civil disobedience, and we will march. And more like we've had this time than we've had before, we've had quite a rainbow of people who've been willing to join the coalition in being able to move this dialogue forward. So I think it's very much alive. And, over history, we'll probably see that every so many decades and generations, we're going to have to continue to move forward to have demonstrations such as this, such that we can continue to form a more perfect union for our country.
Mr. Bruce, is the King's dream dead or alive today?
No doubt. I would agree with Dr. Moss. The dream is alive. It's alive in you. It's alive in me. It's alive in our parents. And the longer we live, the more relevant his dream becomes. And that's why this day is so important to all of us, not only to preceding generations, but to succeeding generations, because it reminds us to re-energize ourselves, to renew ourselves, and to regroup, and to move forward beyond this day to keep his dream going. If we look at what's happening, and let's look at the fact that he was only 34 years old when he gave that speech.
Wow.
Not only was he a gifted and powerful orator, but he was prophetic.
Yes. Yeah.
All of his messages, and the more that you read his speeches, if you go,
yes.
it's almost as though he were giving them for today. Let's look at what happened in our nation just a few days ago.
Yes.
This terrible uprising. We'll find out more and more about that.
Mm-hmm.
As time goes on, and the racism that we're seeing today, let's just say it has become more emboldened. People feel more empowered. And why do people feel empowered? Because of the leadership that's out there and the message that the leadership is putting on. And that's why those of us who are people of goodwill and people who have an understanding must keep the fight going.
I think it was Alphonse Carr who said, the more things change, the more things remain the same. Take a listen to Dr. King in this interview, to your point, Paul, about the prophetic words often uttered by Dr. King.
Many of the people who supported us in Selma, in Birmingham, were really outraged about the extremist behavior toward Negroes. But they were not at that moment, and they are not now, committed to genuine equality for Negroes. It's much easier to integrate a lunch counter than it is to guarantee an annual income, for instance, to get rid of poverty for Negroes and all poor people. It's much easier to integrate a bus than it is to make genuine integration a reality and quality education a reality in our schools. It's much easier to integrate even a public park than it is to get rid of slums. And I think we are in a new era, a new phase of the struggle, where we have moved from a struggle for decency, which characterized our struggle for 10 or 12 years, to a struggle for genuine equality. And this is where we are getting the resistance, because there was never any intention to go this far. People were reacting to Bull Connor and to Jim Clark rather than acting in good faith for the realization of genuine equality.
Do you think white people in this country, and I'm talking about non-segregationists, people devoid or thinking they're devoid of racism, do you have any idea of what they want the Negro to be in America?
Well, it depends on the level that we are talking here, because I think you have to make a distinction between the people who are genuinely and absolutely committed in the white community on the question of racial equality. And I must confess that I think they're in a very small minority. I think the vast majority of white Americans will go but so far. It's a kind of installment plan for equality, and they are always looking for an excuse to go but so far.
Again, Alphonse Carr said, the more things change, the more things stay the same. Would you agree with Dr. King that it's easier to accomplish something, and we'll start with you, Mr. Booth, than it is other things, but there's a limit, and that the masses want us only to go, or the majority, so far? What's your reaction to what the Dr. King said?
Well, I think what he's talking about is a momentary change as opposed to lasting change. He was for a lasting change as opposed to a feel-good moment. For instance, now I'm finding that the pandemic gives some folks, some white folks, and I have to say that, to be honest, it gives them more excuse when I pass by them or I get on the same elevator. You know, I feel like I didn't bathe that day or I haven't bathed in a few days, because they really try to get away from me, and the pandemic gives them that excuse. But what Dr. King was talking about, all of his life was not only substantive, it was not only needed, but it was something that would move us forward, that would propel us forward, and keep us from this momentary fulfillment. Because all of us know that things are for the moment, don't last. They're great, they're exciting, whatever it is for that particular moment. But when it's all over and when it's said and done, then you have a letdown. But what he was trying to do was to plant seeds. That's what I'm trying to say. You plant seeds, they start growing, and they come into fruition, and they're lasting. And that's our job, is to bring his dream further into fruition for our children and for our children's children.
Well, Dr. Moss, how accepting do you find even some of your colleagues who are of an ethnic group of you being a strong advocate, even in the area of mental health, for something that's for a long time, that ultimately, if we are well, then the likelihood of we will thrive and survive increases? How accepting do you feel when are there times that you push the envelope in your practice, not so much being an activist, but being a proponent, speaking for, even in your field, or against inequities that may exist?
You know, I can't speak for, the vast majority of my colleagues. What I will say is that, I have team members in my practice who've actually been more aggressive than I have been in trying to give a voice to those who are suffering some of these great disparities. So I feel very good about, what our team does. If I were to comment on society at large and our need as a country to push the envelope and for us to move forward, I wholeheartedly believe that there is a huge gap. There's a big void between where we are and what we need to be, just such that we can, pursue wellness, happiness, and prosperity in this country. But to have lasting change that Mr. Booth spoke about, to be able to have those lasting changes, it's going to cost something. It's going to cost more than just talking. It's going to cost more than just, even than marching. The people who have the power and who may even be allies to what we want to accomplish, it's going to cost them something financially. It's going to cost them something politically. And we have to question whether those leaders are willing to make those type of investments in order to push legislation, in order to push change that's necessary for there to be, equity amongst all people. So the things that we see now that make us feel good about what we were able to accomplish last year, it cost a little bit. But to be able to have those big changes, when we talk about doing something about wages, when we talk about doing something about housing, and how those things play a part not only in physical and mental health, and people being able to have subsequent generations which can, take care of their own. In order for us to do those things, it's going to take a political investment that we have to challenge our leaders to see if they're willing to make.
Yeah. I was talking with our granddaughter yesterday, who's only 4 years old, and been reading about the life of Dr. King. We were talking about some of the separate accommodations and the difference between the two of them. The separate accommodations, one the white folks had and one the black folks had. The water fountains, now they were different, and the bathrooms. And she asked us a question that made me pause. She asked, well, what will happen if we don't keep Dr. King's dream? Will we go back to those separate accommodations? And actually, I'm still working on a good answer for her. It was persistent, and she kept probing, but it gave us pause for thought about the significance and the importance of keeping his dream alive, and what will happen if we don't.
Do you think talk like Make America Great Again and Keep America Great, and as we reflect on some of the news footage we saw of those breaking in the Capitol, where we heard people uttering, "This is our house, this is our country, we want our country back, this belongs to us." Do you think, your opinion, that some of those folks may want to return to the place where, because though they said, Jim Crow separate but equal, it wasn't equal, that people want to return to those days, where we have, what your granddaughter was saying, what's going to happen? Do you feel that's the tenor, that when people say keep America great or make America great, that's what they're leading to?
Oh, absolutely. No question. They feel threatened. They see us emerging and encroaching on what they consider their territory. But the question here is, what is your definition of greatness? Say, make America great again. That is what we're dealing with. And let's be very clear. We've all said this and we all know this, that if that had been a Black Lives Matter demonstration, they would have been prepared. For instance, I was in D.C. in August when Al Sharpton, this was during several months after the pandemic, had a demonstration of probably 200,000 people. Washington was prepared. I think I stayed overnight in Georgetown or somewhere out in the suburbs. And in preparation for that, folks were boarding up their stores, the liquor stores, and all those stores that they thought we would in. And nobody even ever came out that way.
Right, right.
What I'm saying, there is still a disparity, a very clear disparity that we're dealing with, and that melee, that trying to take over the government was a clear example of that disparity.
Yeah, because in all the news footage, they were showing footage from in August, showing when the protests were. They were folks all on the steps of the Lincoln Monument. They were all Lincoln Memorial. They all of the agencies had come together and they were working together. But something happened on January 6th, and what I saw as an African American male is what we as a people have always seen, that race that based on the people who were arrested, and some of them were police officers, that white supremacists, one of the hideouts for white supremacists is in law enforcement. And we've been saying that, and we've been very vocal about that, and they've been saying, no, that's not the case. There's no systematic racism. But now, as more information comes to the forefront, we have all, as African Americans, can claim the title of prophet, because we've been saying that this is what it was, and that this was a result of that. Would you agree, even Dr. Moss?
Yeah, I would agree that, this systemic racism has its tentacles in, most forms of government, and unfortunately law enforcement is not immune to that. And, I'm saddened by the number of people who participated, but not surprised. Our great challenge now is how can we have this path of accountability, but trying to promote unity at the same time. And that is a difficult tightrope that I think our country may have to walk here over not the next several months, but the next several years, as we put more energy in trying to dismantle this element of white supremacy in our country.
A lot of people are just tired of talking about racism. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, what I was going to say, and the other sad thing about it is the complicity.
Yes,
that allowed them to do that. And clearly, there was complicity. There were tours in a building that was shut down.
Absolutely, the day before.
Prior to that, and every time I've been there, and I've been to the Capitol building several times, you had to go through checkpoints. Or to even get near, or in order to approach that. So it's a sad and unfortunate thing, but it just goes to illustrate to us that the work that we have to do to continue to fight these disparities that our parents and those before our parents had to live with, and that we are sadly living with today.
So many people, I was going to say, with the racism that just go away. And there are a lot of people who are very passive and seem to be indifferent and seemingly want to downplay it and almost ignore the racism that exists. We can listen to another clip of what Dr. King said really about when to act.
I'm sure you've heard this idea. It is the notion almost that is something in the very flow of time that will miraculously cure all evils. And I've heard this over and over again. There are those, and they're often sincere people, who say to Negroes and their allies in the white community that we should slow up and just be nice and patient and continue to pray, and in 100 or 200 years the problem will work itself out, because only time can solve the problem. I think that is an answer to that myth, and it is that time is neutral. It can be used either constructively or destructively. And I'm absolutely convinced that the forces of ill will in our nation, the extreme righteous in our nation, have often used time much more effectively than the forces of goodwill, and it may well be that we will have to repent in this generation, not merely for the vitriolic words of the bad people and the violent actions of the bad people, but for the appalling silence and indifference of the good people who sit around and say, wait on time. Somewhere we must come to see that social progress never rolls in on the wheels of inevitability. It comes through the tireless efforts and the persistent work of dedicated individuals, and without this hard work, time itself becomes an ally of the primitive forces of social stagnation. And so we must help time, and we must realize that the time is always right to do right.
Quite powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Quite powerful. You know, we were told a while back that the coronavirus would magically disappear. and we all know that miracles don't happen without the Savior. I don't know of any miracles that happen without the Savior. But you know what?
Mm-hmm.
America has to want to be healed.
Yes.
Man was laying at the pool of Bethesda. I believe
Yes,
it.
sir.
You correct me on this.
The house of mercy in the Hebrew tongue. Go ahead,
He
sir.
said, "Do you want
Yes.
to be healed?"
Yes.
So
Yeah.
and so there are a couple of things in that question.
Mm-hmm.
That is, first of all, you have to confess that you got a problem.
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
Now that you confess that you have a problem,
Mm-hmm.
do you want that problem to be moved or to be removed?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In America today still.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the question. Is America willing to realize that beside the coronavirus, there's a pandemic that has been raging for over 401 years in this country?
No question.
And it's a fair question Jesus asked, because there are many people, there are many alcoholics today who have an opportunity, programs provided for them to become sober. But the question is, do they really want to be healed? There's some people that show up at Dr. Moss's clinic who are dealing
and inherent in that question is, are you willing to give up
Yes.
what is preventing your healing?
Yeah.
That's what we don't want to do. We don't want to give up that power. We don't want to give up those whatever those privileges that we have that are standing in the way of our healing.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Moss.
I agree. I agree with you 100%. And, it goes back to the question, what is the country willing to pay? Mm-hmm. What is the country willing to give up in order to move this forward? I do believe that the actions of Dr. King and how he led the movement are effective, and even effective for today. If we were to contrast what occurred last year when we marched in protest against police brutality, and we were to compare that to what occurred on January 6th in their tactics to try to move that effort forward, I believe that the country gained more traction with efforts towards peace and love as opposed to violence and mayhem. So I have a great deal of optimism about where our country can go if it's willing to say that it is sick and that it needs help. And I think it's up to us and the rest of the community to continue to highlight these areas where the country is sick, and we've been becoming even more effective with that. And we have people who don't necessarily hold political power, but people who hold the power of the purse, who are willing to then make changes secondary to the sickness that's been discovered. And if you look at what's happened after the Capitol insurrection, the people who have the power of the purse have started to make some moves to disenfranchise, patronage or donations to those people who were part of the insurrection. Right. So as we get the political process involved, as we get those people who who control the purse in this country involved and sympathetic to where this country needs to go, I think that we can continue to see movement.
But I believe that it starts with each and every one of us, that there has a responsibility. And you're absolutely right, Deacon Booth, that it causes us to give up something, to be willing to give up something for a greater good. Dr. King understood that it took sacrifice. And the night before he died, this is what he had to say.
We say to America is be true to what you said on paper. If I lived in China or even Russia or any totalitarian country, maybe I could understand some of these illegal injunctions. Maybe I could understand the denial of certain basic First Amendment privileges because they haven't committed themselves to that over there. But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right. And so just as I say we aren't going to let any dogs or water hoses turn us around, we aren't going to let any injunction turn us around. Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now because I've been to the mountaintop. I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land.
I believe that we'll get there, but it's going to take the resolve of all of those who have and allow the love of God to rule over their hearts and their lives to get us there. Gentlemen, it has been awesome. It has been great. It has been awe-inspiring. One final word from each of you to our audience tonight.
Well, let me just say this. I'm stirred every time I hear that last message. Our understanding is that he spoke for over an hour that night. He did not want to go. He was not feeling well. They pushed him to go, and those words are to move us forward and to stir us into action for his sacrifice, the sacrifice of his family, and all those who work with that gave us the rights. And this is what we have to share with our children and our children's children and all succeeding generations, so that we can not only and the only way to keep it alive is to keep involved and to keep moving and to keep doing something.
Dr. Moss?
You know, I echo with Mr. Booth said, and I just want to reflect that King's vision for African Americans was really a vision for America. It was a vision for all of those people who are disenfranchised, who lack opportunity, economically depraved, those folks who've been shut out from the dreams that this country is supposed to allow folks to pursue. His vision was for all of America. And I think that we make our greatest traction, our greatest progress when we can pull everybody, on this bandwagon of love and try to move things forward.
Dr. King's favorite hymn was, "If I can help somebody
Yeah.
pass along," he said, then my living shall not be in vain. Brothers, thank you. Thank you
Yes,
all
sir.
for
Thank
watching
you.
tonight. As always, we encourage you to feel better, become better, and live better. Our final
I am happy. I am happy. I have a dream.
I got a dream.
One day.
We gonna work it out.
One day.
We gonna work it out.
One day.
We gonna work it
I
out.
have a dream.
I got a dream.
One day.
We gonna work it out.
One day.
We gonna work it out.
One day.
We gonna work
I
it out.
have a dream.
I got a dream.
That one day.
That one day
That one day.
I'ma look deeper than myself. I gotta find a way.
I have a dream.
My dream is to be free. My dream is to be. My dream is to be. My dream is to be free.
In search of brighter days, I ride through the maze of the madness. Struggle is my address where pain and crack lives. Gunshots coming from sounds of blackness. Given this game with no time to practice. Born on the blacklist. Told I'm below average. A life with no cabbage. That's no money if you from where I'm from. Funny, I just want some of your son. Dark clouds seem to follow me. Alcohol that my pop swallow bottle me. No apology, I walk with a bolt on my shoulder. It's a cold war, I'm a colder soldier. Hold the same fight that made Martin Luther the king. I ain't using it for the right thing. In between lean and the fiends, hustle and the schemes, I put together pieces of a dream. I still have one.
I got a dream.
One day.
We gonna work it out.
One day.
We gonna work it out.
One day.
We gonna work it out.
I have a dream.
I got a dream.
One day.
We gonna work it out.
One day.
We gonna work it out.
One day.
We gonna work
I
it out.
have a dream.
I got a dream.
That one day.
That one day
That one day.
I'ma look deeper than myself. I gotta find a way.
I have a dream.
My dream is to be free. My dream is to be. My dream is to be. My dream is to be free.
The world see me looking in the mirror, images of me getting much clearer. Dear self, I wrote a letter just to better my soul. If I don't express it, then forever I hold inside. I'm from a side where we gotta control. Rap music and the hood play the fatherly role. My story like yours, yo, gotta be told. Trying to make it from a gangster to a Galia role. Red scrolls of stone slaves, the Jewish people in cold cage. Hate has no color or age, flip the page. Now my race became freedom. Right dreams in the dark, they far, but I can see them. I believe in heaven more than hell. Blessings more than jail. In the ghetto, letting love prevail. With a story to tell. My eyes see the glory and well. The world waiting for me to yell. I have a dream.
I got a dream.
One day.
We gonna work it out.
One day.
We gonna work it out.
One day.
We gonna work it out.
I have a dream.
I got a dream.
One day.
We gonna work it out.
One day.
We gonna work it out.
One day.
We gonna work it
I
out.
have a dream.
I got a dream.
That one day.
That one day
That one day.
I'ma look deeper than myself. I gotta find a way.
I have a dream.
My dream is to be free. My dream is to be. My dream is to be. My dream is to be free.
Mm-hmm.